NFS, the North Florida music scene, hearted in Jacksonville and stretching from Orlando to Atlanta, is vast and vibrant. While other regions are famous for a singular sound, the cohesive evolution of this area remains largely unchronicled. In this series, I, Mica, composer, big band leader, and owner of the Studio at NFS Ranch, interview the musicians across this lush landscape to spotlight the thriving heritage and culture alive within the North Florida scene. Hi, thank you for joining me on this episode of Mica at NFS, where I interview Keith Javors, where he recorded a new album, Dare You to Move, at our Studio NFS Ranch. Stay on the lookout for this album when it's released. You're going to love it because it involves many musicians from the North Florida region. Enjoy the interview. As far as recording the album that's coming up, why'd you choose down here?
Why did I choose?
Down here in North Florida.
I think when we started, I started talking about it with Ray and Juan, and we had we recorded this record in 04, I think, close to the jungle. And so we had talked about doing some kind of reunion after 20 years. And so I guess Ray and I started talking about it, and we kind of just throwing it around, and then eventually the more we talked about players, more it sort of seemed possible that we do that. So the guys we have from that recording is Ray and Juan. Ricky was going to be involved, but then we have sort of a thing with his back or what have you. So that's kind of the impetus as far as when we started talking about it, why we sort of went that way. Just wanted to sort of really, as much for personal reasons as musical reasons, just to, because I left Jacksonville in 05, and I kept in good touch with lots of folks out here, Ray and Chris Funky and Juan and stuff, but hadn't made it back to the area until I came back. This was a year ago when we first saw each other.
Double check that I recorded.
Oh, sure.
Word. Yeah.
So it was kind of one of the things I hadn't seen Ray in a while. Ray and I, of all the guys, I've known Ray probably longest because we were students together at the University of Illinois. I met him in 96, I think it was. So it's just an opportunity. It'd be great to see you again. Great to see all the cats. At that particular point, I also really wanted to see that. And fortunately, Bucky and I kept a good touch over the years, which is good. My hope was to make it down here while he was still around, and so I'd be able to see him again. Just with him being sick and stuff, that didn't work out maybe the way that I had hoped for. But I think it's probably as much, when we first started talking, as much for just to break bread together, just get together with folks and see folks that you love and that are important to you. And the music thing kind of came along with it. And the more we talked about players. He mentioned Todd. I didn't know Todd at that point. I was super glad that he introduced me to Todd. Is just a phenomenal, unbelievable player.
Sonically very different than Dane.
That's interesting. Very, very different. And I was even some of the pieces I wrote for the record sort of have Dane's sort of thing where he'll do the altissimo kind of swing thing. And Todd does that too. But it was interesting because it was in a different way, a different sort of approach to tone. And I didn't know, how that would end up working. And now that I've been involved in it, it's different, but it's great. Still has that urgency and that power to it. It's just sort of a different approach to the tonal production of it. So Todd ended up being a great fit for it. Juan was, of course, a great fit for it because he had done the previous one. And then he's adding the other guys, Stefan and Stan and Akia. Stan, of course, Stan was a student when I was here, so I was kind of getting to reacquaint myself with Stan and learn a little bit about what he's been doing. Stefan, I just met a year ago or so, and that came at the recommendation. David Taylor, somebody else I've talked to through the years, said, "Yeah, check out this guy Stefan. He's great." And so when I came down the first time, we did a gig at the Blue Jay, and was just blown away, not just by his feel, and his fire, but his creativity. And people prefer different things. For me, I love creativity. I would almost take creativity above many other things. And I found that in stepping, that as a piano player, I was able to kind of reach for things. And if you got the right group of people, you're able to reach for things, and they're able to go with you. But there's also that element of trust, that is so important in chemistry of a group. Because as a pianist, if I start to venture outside of something that might not be commonplace, or something that's a little more risky, if you will, you've got to have that trust that the musicians are good, that they're going to hear when something as simple as when I lose one. And not embarrassed to say, at this point in life, I still lose one sometimes. I'll be reaching for something, and next thing you know, okay, where's beat one at? But a good intuitive player like these guys are able to kind of realize, okay, he's going for something, but also can realize he might need some handles of where one is, and so at the right time, bam, and then kind of able to reacquaint yourself with that. The creativity part, I love that about all of the guys. I like the idea of trying to do work to kind of go for things that we haven't gone for before. And there's a certain element of risk to that, and I think that may be why some players shy away from the creativity thing at a certain point, of being too creative, because, as I mentioned, as far as losing one, that's a risk. Start playing polyrhythms and stuff, might lose where beat one is. But the right kind of players that are able to be both creative but also intuitive, that element of trust, because we love each other, so we know that, hey, if for some reason somebody else loses one or loses the form, just that element of trust that, okay, I can see that. Let me show you where we're at. That part seems to be so important.
How did that sit? So y'all had y'all's first gig as a group the other night at Blue Jays. How did that unfold?
I think for the first time actually playing these songs in public, I thought it went really well. I thought that they did. Certainly some moments there that we sort of have to heighten up a little bit, but I thought the spirit was real good, and they're really, these guys are just, they're phenomenal musicians, so it's a great place to be when you're able to sort of go for things, or even, as as a composer, you're able to write for things. I don't know, Mike, if you've had this experience, but I think when I was younger, I would almost try to lock in kind of what people should play. Like, okay, if I'm hearing it this way, then the drummer should be hearing it this way, the bass player should be hearing it this way. I realized over time that one of the benefits of playing with great musicians is to be open to the fact that they may have something in mind that they hear that's way hipper, way better than what I thought about. And I love that part. So as I told the guys when we got together, I kind of emphasized this to them, that the reason that they're here and that I love their playing and stuff is because of what they bring. So I think that's something that ages kind of help, and maybe that's tempered with life a little bit too, in terms of just empathy and understanding and tolerance and that kind of thing to a certain point. You're able to say, hey, I want Stephen to bring Stephen. I don't want Stephen to bring his idea of what he should play under Keith or something. To me, that's when musicians will do their best. It's kind of like as human beings, my feeling is that we're best at being who we are. Like, I'm not going to be great at being Mica. I'm not going to be great at being Ray or Stefan, but I can be pretty good, hopefully, with being myself. And I want the musicians to have that sort of same experience where they don't feel like that I'm locking them into a groove or something. And then I think when I was younger, even when I was a professor here, I tended to be maybe a little bit more closed-minded, maybe in that way, thinking, okay, like the big band with John Davis, well, hey, why don't you play this and play this on the hi-hat, or cross over and play this? And I think finding just the talents of the players, if you let them be themselves and encourage their own uniqueness, there can be a lot more magic, maybe.
Because as a young player, you want to have that. You get a big band, you want to have that micromanagement. You want to. Your first chance to control a giant musical group.
It is, and also stated from a prior control freak anyway. You know, I mean, admittedly, I mean, wanting to be in control of every single thing. And it took some time and some growing up, you know, to realize that that's not always the best thing. But sometimes the best thing reminds me of something Ed Soaps told me when I was in school in North Texas. I'd asked him at one point, you know, what's the most important thing that you could teach a student or that you could bring to a student? And he would say the most important thing that you could teach a student is to teach them how to be themselves. And I didn't really understand that until a little bit later in life. So I think as the years went by, it's become easier for me to kind of trust and let go of the reins that, hey, I heard this as a drummer in my head when I wrote it. And to get so married to that I strip them of their ability to come up with something that might be 10 times better than what I came up with.
I actually have felt that a lot with the big band. Because, you know, I'll write the groove for the drums. I'll write the comping pattern. I'll write the bass lines. Yeah. You get in there, and the guys who play those instruments far beyond my abilities ever will start doing their own thing.
Right.
And in its own way, it's better, but it's not what I had preordained in my mind.
Right.
And it's really hard to deal with that clash, especially when you're writing. And like on Finale, you're listening to it a billion times over and over. You're almost brainwashing yourself with your own style.
That's a good point.
And it's
yes. Yeah, and I think that's a good. I mean, I feel that same way as you do it as a writer. Because by the time I brought these tunes down here, I mean, I had played through them probably a ton of times and sort of had this vision in my head of what it would sound like. But you're right, there is almost like a subtle sort of brainwashing there where you start to think that, okay, that's the way it sounds. And I think when I was more closed-minded, I would be more rigid. You know, I'd be like, no, this is the way I heard it, this is the way I heard it. But maybe just time or time tempers you, you know, and you kind of learn. And now when I met with the guys first time here, that I mentioned, hey, I don't ever tell a drummer what groove to play. I mean, unless it's a very specific situation. I would rather say I don't want to tell you what groove to play. I don't want to tell you what approach to play, because I want to be open to their talents, that what they come up with, like I said, maybe a million times hipper than what I could have ever thought of. And plus, like you said, already being so locked into what I was hearing, can almost become almost like a prison, you know. Mind you, something that Bunky always told me, he said, you know, all prisons don't have bars. So one of those heavy things from Bunky, you know. And I thought about that musically, you know, that we can tend to lock ourselves in if we're not open to the great strengths and other ways of hearing people.
Now take it on a different route. As far as the album, you chose that Switchfoot track as like the title track, correct?
I did, yeah.
So does this piece have a specific meaning for you as to making it the title track?
Yeah, for me, it was sort of a personal sort of process. I mean, Dare You to Move is kind of about, it's like when you talk about the redemption arc, you know, it's kind of about, you know, redemption and grace and some of those types of things. I came back. I grew up in the church, and I was strong in my faith. You know, probably about 12 or 13, I came to Christ. Over the years, I kind of slid away from that foundation, which I'm not sure was the best for me. But ended up coming back and sort of having call it a spiritual awakening, or I don't know what you might call it. So just being, as you mentioned before, you know, human beings are complex creatures. You know, it's always hard for us we can never really pigeonhole anybody into this or that, because there's so many layers of complexity. But my own personal growth, you know, and just looking back at the course of my life, at mistakes that I've made, the times that I got it right, but also being able to grow enough to acknowledge the times that I didn't get it right. say, okay, man, there were times, man, I thought I got it, I thought I had it right, but then I was totally wrong about it. So, Dare You to Move is, in some of the lyrics, it talks about forgiveness, repentance. It talks about personal growth. It talks about personal strength. Those kind of things that are really sort of based on the idea that, for me, it was sort of a message it was almost like a message to say, Keith, stop looking outwardly, start looking inwardly, and realizing that so much, I think it's easy, and it's a psychological term, we talk about projection, like when we have stuff that's going on inside of us that maybe not the easiest or whatever, unhealthy or unhealed versions of ourselves, it's easy for us to project that something else. And I realized, that could be me many times, rather than to deal with internal types of storms or really, try to relate to others and their own unique experiences, my own insecurities would almost allow me to grab onto those reins even harder, rather than being able to release those and sort of let those go in favor of something that's better. So I think when I picked Dare You to Move, that song really, really spoke to me. Another element I've struggled with my whole life with anxiety and depression. And for a long time, it was something that you would never, 20 years ago, we probably wouldn't have had this conversation, because I would have been maybe too proud or something to be able to say, you know what, I get anxious, I get depressed, this is something that I experienced. It was easy to sort of project maybe not so positive things outward, rather than to own my own issues, own my own stuff, and say, okay, depressed, where is this coming from? And I think whether it's through returning to my faith or just returning to self, Dare You to Move is almost like an anthem for me to kind of return to sort of a healthier, a better, clearer state of mind. Things feel very different for me these days. My paradigm is different. The way that I feel about things is different. My patience is different. My love is different. I'm not as selfish as I once was, and so that was a pretty heavy moment. But the reason I say all of this is that when you ask about Dare You to Move, it was really that kind of feeling of like, dare you to move, kind of like activation therapy and psychotherapy, where, dare you to move, dare you to lift yourself off of the floor. Salvation is here, redemption is here. And really started believing in things like that. And not just for myself, not just like the tenderness I could take with myself and the love I could have myself but also towards others, to be able to try to see people not through the lens or the prism of kind of my own shortcomings or my own struggles, but to see them as being people that God loved every bit as much as He loved me. And that's kind of the paradigm how I see life these days. Is every person that I meet, is somebody very important, if not to God, certainly God, but to other people. I mean, every person in here has people in their life that loves them, that cares about them, regardless of whether they're worst or best versions of self. And I mean, it sounds cliche to say everything feels different, everything's different, but in my experience has been that it is. At that point, I came back to the faith that I grew up with in kind of when I was young, but from not a perspective, because I've been involved in music ministry throughout the years, but not from the perspective of religion as a set of rules or a set of things that we need to check off or something like that, but more in terms of relationship, which I think can apply to any faith, whether you're Zen Buddhist or Hindu or whatever it is, there's a certain relationship between self, higher power, and the world around them. So the Dare You to Move thing is really a kind of a heavy track for me, because it's kind of like, for me it was kind of, dare you to become healthy, dare you to become the best version of self. Dare you to rediscover things about yourself that you didn't know. Also dare you to be able to, well, in the words of Carl Jung, to face our shadow side. That all of us are infinitely capable of amazing love, but all of us have a shadow side, that we're also capable of things that aren't loving and aren't great. And to really embrace that as being, part of who we are. And just things today, it's different in that I just want to be the best version of self for others, but not in terms of just being a musician. My brokenness, when I was much younger, I'll tell you how to put this. When I was much younger, I was closer to my faith, but it was more of almost like a self-righteousness, behind that faith. Something that I've experienced in religion, and I'm probably a Christian, or I prefer Jesus follower. I don't really like the term Christian because it can be misunderstood. I like to follow the teachings of Jesus, the way somebody would follow the teachings of Buddha or what have you. And just try to, I think if we take all the things out of the Bibles, take everything away except the words in red, except what Jesus spoke, just as a model of how we can live our lives and love and try to be the best versions of self. And also look into our shadow. And for me, it took a long look in God's mirror to look back and say, you know what? You were not always the best version of self. There's many times you got it wrong.
On a wacky note, then, is it fear of mannequins or scared of mannequins?
Scared of mannequins.
What is behind that? I love that track. I want to know what it's about.
It's a good question. It's really about sort of fear of versions of ourselves that aren't healed, or aren't whole, or aren't cognizant or conscious of. What I think about a lot is that that it's not about me. That I'm just one small lip in my finger to think about how I affect the world around me. And so this idea that sometimes you'll hear in church circles, the idea of this sort of peeling off the plastic. So scared of me is kind of like scared of versions of ourselves that aren't authentic, or aren't true. But definitely not scared of actual mannequins. Although the way I came to that title, when I was young, I used to I was scared of mannequins. I would go into stores and see mannequins, and I would call them, "Oh, that's a scared man," or "scared lady," "scared lady." But for me, as going through this process, it kind of took on a different meaning. So it could be, acknowledging our shadow side and fear of our shadow side, or fear of, what I was going to say is to be, how can I be the best version of self to care about the world around me and not just be so concerned and so, hyper focused on self, which I think can happen as a point of insecurity. It was very, very blurry for me for a while, but the more clarity I think I'm able to get, the more I'm able to say it's not scared of people. It's almost like a fear of us not being the best version of self. If that makes any sense.
I feel that. So it's not like you're looking for perfection, but you're aiming towards it.
Yeah.
Kind of like that. It's always striving to be a better person. That feeling like technically like you've arrived at better.
Yes.
But it's a constant.
Yeah, for me, it's every day is kind of like, how do I affect the world around me? So I look at every interaction that we have as an opportunity to do one or two things. We can either build somebody up or we can tear somebody down. Sometimes we can tear somebody down without even realizing we're doing it. So it was, at this point in my life, I mean, I'm really interested in how I affect the world around me. I think when I was, certainly under the drugs, but the other component of it is kind of growing up and being kind of exceptional at music at a younger age. I had sort of interwoven identity, kind of my identity, not as child of the planet, child of God. My identity was music. I grew up very, very poor in a very rural, small town, single family home. Things were very, 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 very difficult. I didn't have the nice clothes. I didn't have anything. So it was. But when I started getting good at piano, very, very young, things started to shift. People sort of started to pay attention to me and almost saw me as worthwhile or something. So I made kind of a negative correlation, a negative linkage between I play good, I am good. I play terribly, I'm worthless. And so music ended up becoming an identity.
Does it bleed on how you see others? If they don't play well, they're worthless. It's almost bleeding to other relationships too. Not necessarily, but you know what I mean.
No, I do, and that's an excellent question. I think in ways maybe it can. Maybe not totally, like being in front of a big band like a JU1 or something. It wasn't like I didn't see people as human beings or something. But to me, what was most important was that when I signed on in North Florida, what I was told as a big band director when I came here was, the idea is to bring the first band into prominence, to make them one of the best bands in the country. Well, I took that to heart. I thought that that's really what it was all about. And so I ended up being in a way, very draconian, as an educator. It must be this way, it must be this way. You're not practicing enough, you're not practicing enough.
I said it a couple of rehearsals.
So, and it's, just, I can own that, it's real.
In a little bit of ways, I admired that to a degree because I couldn't do that. Like with my band, I'm not going to call names, but, a guy could be doing a solo and not like how someone's following them. And it's a rehearsal, right? And in my mind, I'm like, I want to make sure you get the other parts right. Y'all walk in the gig. For them, it's that, and it's like, feed. And I'm not upset they weren't following them, but they are.
Yeah,
right? And then it's like, all right, am I too far? Am I not caring enough about the right things?
Right.
So, and I admire you because you're like, no, you need to do this to the point.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess you're saying you felt like you were going too far with it to a degree.
Not all the time, but
I wasn't in every rehearsal. So.
Well, no, but there were times where, if I'm being honest with self, which I try to always be, there was times where it was most important that the band played its stuff. And the music was my identity. I mean, it was before I realized that I wanted to be with a partner, that I wanted to have a family, these things. Everything was music. So what many people don't know is that when I would come home from UNF, rather than come home to family life or something like that, I'd be home, I was analyzing scores for the next day's band rehearsal. Okay, how can this band be better? How can this... So the positive part of it is that, the students of UNF are unbelievably gifted and amazing, creative music beyond even what I could dream of. And maybe I was somewhat of a catalyst behind that. But in terms of priorities, what's shifting now is that it's someone's... it's more important to me how I affect the world around me on a personal level than if something's really great in music. And I think I had those kind of inverted and flipped in certain instances.
Sometimes you have to learn the lesson the hard way.
This is true.
So, we're going to wrap it up. If you want to tell the audience, Keith Javors, find you at?
Well, you can visit my website at keithjavors.com, or find me on all the major music platforms as well.
We'll link the Facebook and Instagrams in the video. Have a nice day.